What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, Blurred Without Fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, today's video, we're going to be talking about the Marvel Comics character, Nighthawk. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about this character in order to hold an intelligent conversation about them and more right now. But first, if you want to see more awesome videos like this one, hit that subscribe button. I post multiple videos throughout the week, plus live stream the Blurred Cave every Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. So hit that bell button. That way you don't miss anything. With that out of the way, it's time to ponder the question, who is Nighthawk?
You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
Nighthawk, real name Kyle Richmond, first appeared in Supreme Power #2 in 2003 and was created by J. Michael Straczynski and Gary Frank. Nighthawk originally hails from Earth 31916, and though little is known about his life prior to becoming a costumed vigilante, he did witness his mother and father be gunned down by a gang of racist rednecks in a drive-by shooting. He would later use his father's investments and dealings to create his own company, one that would make him an incredibly wealthy man. He'd use this wealth to create a costume and weapons that would allow him to take on the white supremacists and racists of his Earth and put his focus towards hate crimes. If you can't tell already, Nighthawk was created to be a pastiche of Batman, so they have a ton of similarities. That said, the abilities and skill sets they have are not that far off either, as well as what kinds of weaponry and gadgets they tend to use. Nighthawk is a regular human being and has no superpowers whatsoever. He does have about roughly the same level of strength as a man who regularly exercises in high-intensity sessions and engages in extreme CrossFit exercises. This is not so much a power, but something Kyle has done to help him better fight superpowered individuals is that he's practiced repeatedly bare-hand punching brick walls to break the phalanx bones in his hands. This is to make them grow back denser and with less gaps between the bones in his hand to make them sturdier against a superpowered chin like Hyperion's. Speaking of fighting, Nighthawk is an expert hand-to-hand fighter, capable of going toe-to-toe with most superheroes in the Marvel Comics universe, though he has also gotten his fade run on multiple occasions when fighting those with actual superpowers if they were especially powerful. Hyperion and Namor come to mind. That said, he's defeated both of them with a combination of his own combat abilities as well as his highly effective battle strategies. And if you needed any more convincing, he's gone toe-to-toe with both Captain America Steve Rogers as well as Black Panther, and they were evenly matched. On the flip side of that, Nighthawk, for a normal human, has an incredibly high pain threshold and pain tolerance to match. He's fought through having his jaw broken by punches from characters like Hyperion, Redstone, and Namor, as well as his wrist being broken, his hands crushed, being shot, and much more without showing many signs of discomfort other than his inner monologues. Kyle is incredibly brutal. He has no scruples about killing. His methods are often so brutal that they tend to put off his superhero peers. This is actually one of the areas where his similarities to Batman are completely null and void. As proof of his brutality, he has been known to smash his victims face first into concrete, drag them through broken glass, use his grappling hook to break a target's neck, and he's also ripped a man's ears off when he held onto them while headbutting them to death. His ability to read opponents, break down their intentions, and discern what they're thinking is one of his greatest strengths. He's a harsh critic of other people's character, but he's rarely wrong in his judgments. Being a pastiche of Batman, it's hardly a surprise that he's an expert crime scene investigator. And though he does not use them very often, Nighthawk does have expert level marksmanship with firearms. Anything he aims at, he is very likely to hit unless he chooses to miss on purpose. Nighthawk gets his name from a story that his father Titus told him about how when he was a young boy, he and his father would use cardboard cutouts of hawks to scare away vermin on their farm, something he called a nighthawk. This is also an homage to the Nighthawk he saw fly over him shortly after his parents were murdered. An interesting sidebar about Nighthawk's name is that even though he is technically considered to be the Nighthawk, his original costume tended to make him look more like an owl, made even more interesting by the fact that the Earth 3 version of Batman is known as Owlman. As a black superhero in a world that has very few of them, Kyle has a very high opinion of what black men and women with superpowers should be doing with their life. He was very critical of fellow Squadron Supreme member The Blur, also a black man who was simply doing ad campaigns and sponsorships rather than using his super speed to stop crime in his community. Though Blur snapped back against Kyle as a result of this actually did goad the Blur into becoming a more legit superhero. Since Nighthawk is, once again, a pastiche of Batman, it's probably incredibly unsurprising that he keeps everyone around him, even his allies, at a distance. It would also be unsurprising that he doesn't get along with Marvel's Superman analog, Hyperion, because Hyperion is incredibly naive. Though in this case where Batman does respect Superman despite their disagreements, there's a complete lack of respect from Nighthawk towards Hyperion. He's even gone as far as using a special substance that he knew Hyperion was weak against to coerce the Superman like Hyperion to help him shut down racial genocide in Darfur. Nighthawk is such an effective crime fighter, the deputy mayor of Chicago told him that people stopped reporting crimes in the South Side and West Side areas of Chicago because they'd rather Nighthawk do something about it, knowing justice would truly be served rather than relying on the police who would simply just let the criminals slip through the cracks. Nighthawk has been a member of 2 different versions of the Squadron Supreme on both Earth 616 and his native Earth 31916. Nighthawk's original Earth no longer exists. During the Time Runs Out story arc, Earth 31916 was destroyed by the Cabal. This would galvanize Nighthawk into working with other heroes whose Earths were also destroyed or were in danger of being destroyed, and they would form an all-new Squadron Supreme. Their greatest feat was killing Namor the Submariner and destroying Atlantis, though most of that was Hyperion's doing, though Nighthawk did use his newfound secret identity of Raymond Kane to buy out Namor's company, Oracle Incorporated. You might also be surprised that Kyle Richmond is not an original character. The Kyle Richmond of Earth 616 was a character who made their first appearance in Avengers number 69, Giggity, in 1969. Also Giggity, and was a villain. This original version of the character was also a white man, but when the Marvel Max series rebooted the character, the current version of Kyle Richmond was created in his place. Speaking of the original Kyle Richmond, the current Nighthawk got the pleasure or displeasure of meeting the original in Squadron Supreme Volume 4, Number 8, albeit this Earth 616 version of Kyle Richmond was a Skrull imposter. That said, Nighthawk had no scruples about killing him. There's no word on whether or not the real Kyle Richmond of Earth 616 is still out there somewhere, and Marvel doesn't seem very interested in the idea of bringing him back anytime soon. During the events of Secret Empire, Nighthawk was murdered while he was out of costume and protesting Hydra Cap's reign over America. Due to the severity of his wounds, he would eventually die, and Nighthawk was no more until his woman in the chair / protege, Tilda Johnson, took over the mantle. Formerly known as the villain Dr. Nightshade, who some may remember was featured in a pre-villainous capacity in Netflix's Luke Cage Season 2, Tilda served as Nighthawk until Secret Empire ended. Since then, she has had no connection with Nighthawk on any meaningful level and has typically been seen in her old Dr. Nightshade getup, complete with afro puffs. Since his apparent death in Secret Empire, Kyle Richmond has been back on the scene thanks to the efforts of Mephisto, as he created a simulacrum of the Squadron Supreme, now known as the Squadron Supreme of America, and Kyle has been acting as Nighthawk again since Avengers Volume 8, Number 10. This version of Nighthawk is not considered to be the Earth 31916 version that was killed off during Secret Empire, and is considered to be the Nighthawk of Earth TRN, or Time Reality Number 852, since this was a temporary reality. Not only was this version created by Mephisto, but he was also programmed by the Power Elite to be everything that the Earth 31916 version of Kyle Richmond was in terms of skill set and abilities, but also tempered to be more suspicious of his teammates in the squadron, as well as being jealous of them in some capacity, which makes him even more like a sardonic take on Batman than he already was, only this time no longer wearing his patented all-black garb and goggles, but now wearing the costume of the original Kyle Richmond of Earth 616. This Earth TRN 852 version of Nighthawk also seemed to possess some level of superhuman physical attributes that were more potent during the night and weaker during the day, though the extent of what these capabilities allowed him to do was never really ever explored. He also seemed to function at peak human physical capability despite only sleeping once a month. This new version of Kyle Richmond, while still being a very wealthy man who also does a lot of philanthropical work, is no longer a corporate mogul, but is now a politician who makes regular usage of life model decoys to stand in for him, even at political meetings, so that he can continue his superhero work, and was one of the few people in the Heroes Reborn reality that Mephisto created who knew that reality was a fabrication. Despite this, he still didn't want the Avengers interfering and changing things back to normal because he preferred the way things were in the Heroes Reborn reality, which is interesting considering all the death and loss that he bore witness to there, losing his version of Robin, who was Sam Wilson, the Falcon, in that reality in ways only Gwen Stacy can relate to, sharing his girlfriend Power Princess with Hyperion in what was clearly a toxic and tumultuous relationship at best, damaging his trust with the few friends in the superhero community he did have when he donned the alien symbiote Venom not once but twice, and also being responsible for kicking off a superhero civil war. You'd think the guy would want a do-over, but nope. Though to be fair, he likely realized if things went back to the way they were, he'd cease to exist, so I guess I get it. I mentioned earlier that he's fought against Black Panther in the past, but he's also competed against T'Challa for the right to wield the Phoenix Force, a fight that raged on for hours until the Phoenix herself simply saw it as a draw, but advanced Black Panther because she preferred the idea of him wielding her power over Nighthawk. We also know, thanks to Heroes Reborn's conclusion, that Nighthawk will likely wind up being a future villain for the Avengers to face due to losing the Heroes Reborn timeline and being sent back to Earth 616. That said, we really don't have a whole heap of a lot else going on with Nighthawk since Heroes Reborn, and it is also sad to say that he has never appeared in any media outside of comics. If I could pick anyone to play either the Earth 31916 or the Earth TRN 852 version of Nighthawk in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I would pick actor John David Washington, who many of you may know from movies like Tenet and Black Klansman. Now let's get into some recommended reading. I'm going to recommend that you check out Nighthawk's first appearance in Supreme Power number 2, and then jump over to Supreme Power number 4 through 6, and then from there, Supreme Power number 11 through 18. I would also recommend you check out Supreme Power Nighthawk number 1 through 6, which is technically his first solo series. I also recommend you check out Nighthawk Volume 1 number 1 through 6, which makes up the Hate Makes Hate story arc, where he ends up facing a dark mirror version of himself. I also recommend that you check out Squadron Supreme Hyperion versus Nighthawk number 1 through 4 to witness Nighthawk and Hyperion not only face off against one another, but even reluctantly working together. And last but most certainly not least, I recommend you check out Heroes Reborn Volume 2 number 1 and Heroes Reborn Volume 2 number 5 through 7, as well as Heroes Reborn Double Action number 1 and Heroes Return Number 1. These comics in particular would get you more introduced to the Earth TRN 852 version of Nighthawk, which has quickly become my preferred version of the character. That said, Nighthawk I think is a very interesting character. He's yet again one of those black characters who is derivative of a previous existing white character, but I feel like in the case of Nighthawk, his situation is more similar to DC Comics' Mr. Terrific. A lot of people forget that Mr. Terrific was technically a reboot of the original Mr. Terrific of the Justice Society of America, who was originally a white man, but the black Mr. Terrific that we all know and love today has become so iconic in the DC Comics imprint that many people don't even remember that there was a white guy that used to call himself Mr. Terrific before him. I feel the same way about Marvel Comics character Nighthawk. Even though the white version has had way more appearances and has more of a history in Marvel than the black Kyle Richmond, I feel the black version of Kyle Richmond is probably most people's preferred version of the character, whether it's the Earth 3196 version or the Earth TRN 852 version. I feel like this character has just outgrown his original white predecessor and thus has become kind of his own thing, to the point that I don't think anyone's ever going to be checking for the white version of Kyle Richmond ever again. Kobe. But that said, I really enjoy this character, and I would love to know, what do you think about the character Nighthawk? Have you always known about him, or are you today years old finding out about him? Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.